All right, my A-Push friends. First of all, hope you're having a great Monday morning. Hope you had a great weekend. And congratulations on finishing the content of the historical material that we needed to cover for the entirety of period 3. Now, this week, we're going to do something a little bit different. It's going to accomplish a couple things that I want you to be really cognizant of and really aware of and really consider. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to have an opportunity to review a lot of period 3, but we're going to do so by learning how to and actually completing our first DBQ, or document-based question, in accordance to College Board's guidelines, as an introductory piece into what it looks like to write a DBQ for the AP test, and the understanding that it will actually serve as a cool way for us to review a lot of the big changes that happened in period 3. Now, the prompt that we're going to be tackling this week is, get the DBQ out for you, evaluate the extent to which the American Revolution changed society from 1765 to 1800. So actually that's almost the entirety of the time period. Right? Period 3 begins with the French and Indian War, which ends in the Treaty of Paris, 1763, and that big pivotal year with Pontiac's Rebellion on the frontier, and the Proclamation Line, which is the first example of the British government trying to restrict the colonists, the end of salutary neglect, if you will. So this prompt window begins just 2 years later in 1765, which you may recall is the Stamp Act and the Stamp Act Congress and the formation of the Sons and Daughters of Liberty. And it goes all the way to 1800 with the election of Thomas Jefferson and the peaceful transfer of power from the Federalist Party to the Democratic Republicans. So in a sense, what I want you to think about in this prompt as we begin this process is that this isn't just asking about the war, how much the war changes society, but the process by which America becomes independent. How much does that change society in these 35 years? So make sure that we're thinking about doing both things this week, using this learning process of a very challenging type of essay, learning that, but also using that to leverage the ability to review content to include in our essay. Okay, so this is our A-Push DBQ writing seminar number 1. And so far, if something is numbered number 1 or the first of something, chances are there's going to be another one. Quick plug there for the first and then second Continental Congress. You see what I'm talking about? I like A-Push because things are labeled very clearly. Now, this is the first one. So I want you to understand going in that this process is rough, that chances are the first DBQ you write is going to be atrocious, and that is going to be okay. That there's layers to this essay that we need to introduce now so we can get real comfortable with the first couple layers and then dive a little deeper and then dive a little deeper so that come May, by the end of the school year, you're really well equipped with the tools you need to attack whatever prompt College Board puts in front of you, because you know how to approach this and what to do. So it's the first one. It may sound like a lot today. I get it. I understand. But we need to start somewhere. And if we don't really dive into what this video and the handout you're working on asks you to tackle, then we'll start nowhere this week in the live session when you have no idea what's going on. So buckle up as we talk about A-Push DBQ writing in seminar number 1. Now, what the heck is a DBQ and why do we have to write this? Because it sounds intimidating and acronyms scare me. Me too, I understand. So the DBQ is going to be a timed essay. You'll have about an hour to write this, a little under an hour to write this on test day. I'm not going to ask you to write it in an hour yet. We're not there yet, but we'll get there, I promise. So it's a timed essay in which you have the opportunity to do what historians do, just in a way faster process. And what I mean by that is you have a chance to grapple with a question and to use the evidence in front of you. They're going to give you 7 documents to look at, to piece together historical writing, an argument that is based off of the evidence provided to you, and the evidence that you know in your head, which of course is plentiful and far greater than any 7 documents could provide. I want to stress this to you right now because I'm going to stress it to you again later, and then again later, and then probably again later. This is a document-based question, not a document-only question, meaning you're going to have to use these documents to support an argument that you already know exists, as opposed to relying simply on these documents to support an argument that you create based off of these documents. 2 very, very different perspectives and mindsets, so please know that difference. Second thing, for the what and the why. This is a way to assess your ability to earn college credit, which is the point of this class, by engaging in college-style writing, right? Many of your history classes in colleges will have you write like this, right? Taking sources and evidence to craft your argument in this way. Third important piece is this is a way for you to prove that you've learned material that can be used to form an argument, to learn that to show that you know more than just the memorization of what happened in history, but you can use that knowledge to create an argument. And fourth, maybe to some of you the most important piece, the DBQ is actually 25% of your A-Push test score at the end of the year. So it is the biggest chunk of the test that is not multiple choice. So it's a big chunk, and doing well in the DBQ means you're almost guaranteed a really strong A-Push test score. And doing really poorly on the DBQ means that it becomes very, very challenging for you to pass the test and get the college credit that you want. So those are the reasons why. Also, it's not that bad. I promise you. It looks scary. It looks intimidating. You guys can do this. Fortunately, I feel confident in my ability to support you in this process. I was very fortunate the last couple of years to score the DBQ from the AP test for College Board at the AP Reading, which gave me good insight into the kind of feedback I can give each of you individually on how to improve your writing to make sure that we're getting the points and being strategic about what we're doing. So, moral of the story, it might be a struggle the first couple of times, but it's really important that we work through that struggle to improve this ability because it is a very important piece of this class. So first, I want to kind of walk you through the rubric, and then I'm going to let you pause this video because I have some questions. I'm going to ask that you actually go into the rubric. It's in your handout, and really look at what College Board's asking you to do and put into your own words, at least for the beginning part of the rubric, like what it means to write a good thesis according to College Board, what it means to contextualize this prompt according to College Board, okay? So, but you can use this information for this conversation to do so. The first thing I want to stress to you is that without a thesis, we don't have an essay. Your thesis is your argument. Your thesis is the foundation of everything you're saying. So College Board asks you to respond to the prompt with a historically defensible thesis, meaning you can't just say whatever the heck you want. It has to be defensible historically. And you have to establish your line of reasoning, meaning you have to give the reasons why. If my wife were to ask me, for example, what do you want for lunch? And I replied with food, well, that's not a thesis. If I replied with, I would like tacos, that's not a thesis either. But tacos sound great for lunch because they are delicious, they are affordable, and I'm really in the mood for some tacos. Well, now I gave you what I wanted, and I gave you my line of reasoning. Like, now we have to have tacos. And now, actually, frankly, I'm going to be honest with you, now I'm in the mood for tacos. I'm going to have to find some tacos later. Now, it's important that you look at then this italicized piece over here is that earning this point means you have to do more than just restate or rephrase the prompt, right? For example, if you were asked, like, what were the causes of the Civil War? And you put causes of Civil War were various. There were economic causes, political causes, and social causes. You haven't said anything, right? All you've done is rephrase the prompt and add some categories. That's not a line of reasoning, nor is that a historically defensible thesis. So that's important that you understand that you need to make an argument. You need to include why that's your argument, and it needs to make a claim, all right? Also very important, your thesis needs to be. Not optional, not if you feel like it, not maybe this time, but not next time. Needs to be in either the introduction or the conclusion, right? It has to be in your first paragraph or it has to be in your last paragraph. What I would suggest is put it in both. Put it in both places because sometimes as you're writing, you realize a better way to phrase your thesis, and then in the conclusion, you can write it a little more clearly because it's a timed essay, so you're kind of working through these things. So by the conclusion, maybe you're a little more clear on what it is you're really trying to argue, and you can include that then in your conclusion. So got to be in the first paragraph or the last paragraph. My suggestion, included in both. Okay, that's your thesis. The next piece is contextualization. Contextualization. And College Board asks you to describe a broader historical context relevant to the prompt. In this sense, what you're going to do is you're going to zoom out a little bit. Like this prompt is very zoomed in on like these 35 years and how the American Revolution changed society. Zoom out a little bit, right? What's some really important background information that might help the reader understand like how we got here and what's going on? A couple ways to think about this. Thing one way to think about it is asking yourself, this is kind of like a TV show, right? And if you just sat down and watched a TV show in the middle of season 6, you would have no idea what the heck was going on. It wouldn't make any sense. But if you watch the TV show, at the beginning, they usually have a little thing like it's called previously on blank. Okay? So think about your essay prompt as a TV show. And this TV show is about society and how society changes. So then maybe you can ask yourself, previously on the last 50 years of society, write about that. Okay, so think about what the prompt is asking you about. That's kind of your zoomed in topic. Zoom out and figure out what happened in the background that got us to this point. What might my reader need to know to understand the background that's relevant to understanding how the American Revolution changed society? Okay. So in the italicized piece, we have to respond. The response must relate the topic of the prompt, which is society because of the revolution, to broader, more zoomed out historical events, developments, or processes. And you can use events before, during, or after. And it is important the College Board also includes that this point is not awarded for merely a phrase or reference. So the way I like you to write your introductory paragraph is in your introduction, you should spend 2 to 4 sentences first on contextualization. Give me the background information. What's happened? What makes this make sense? And then give me your thesis. And then new paragraph after that, because your thesis has to be in the introduction. Then you can actually get into your argument. Okay, and that's where this evidence piece comes in. So I want you to make sure that as we're working through this process, you would attempt to address your thesis point and your contextualization point in the introduction. Background information and argument. All right, there you go. Now, once you get to the evidence piece, that's where things get a little more, not nuanced, but a little more like layered, if you will. So this is what I mean when I tell you that it's a document-based question, not a document-only question, because there's 2 points that you can gather from using the documents, and there's 1 point that you can gather on the rubric from using evidence that's not in the documents that still supports your argument. So first, and I'll give you some examples of this later, so I'm just introducing the rubric and then you'll see what it looks like in action. Don't get nervous. We're okay, I promise. First, you have to use the content, use the material, use what's in and about at least 3 of the documents to address the topic of the prompt. So the topic of the prompt is the American Revolution changing society. You got to use the content of 3 documents to address that. All right, that's the baseline. Right? That's the bottom. You used 3 documents accurately in your essay, you get a point. Congratulations. The second evidence point is much more challenging because it asks you to use 6 documents, so 6 out of the 7, and not just use them, not just have them in your essay, like summarized, but use them to support your argument. Use them to demonstrate your point. Use them as supporting evidence for the argument you laid out in your thesis, okay? So back to my taco analogy, this would be like me saying, I want tacos, these are the reasons why, and then according to this restaurant review from such and such, this taco place is the best because these reasons, and therefore, according to document 2, we're having these tacos for lunch. Right? Back full circle. So looking at the italicized piece, it's important that we try to do this with at least 6 of our documents, to use the content and to make sure that it supports our argument. So during the first point, you must accurately describe, do not, let me say this right now, and say it again 47 times this year. If you quote your documents, document 2 says, and you quote it to me, I will light your essay on fire. Now, I know we're in distance learning right now, and I don't actually have a hard copy of your essay. I will print your essay out, and then I will light it on fire, which wastes my ink, and it might make my smoke detector come on, and we don't want that. You don't want to quote the documents. You want to use the evidence in the documents to further your argument. So you must accurately describe the content from at least 3 documents, and accurately describe the content from 6 documents while supporting an argument in response to the prompt. So think about it like this. You get half of this point, half of these 2 points comes from just summarizing what's in the documents. The other half comes from making sure that what's in these documents is used to support your argument. Now I'm going to say that this last rubric point we're going to focus on for today, down here is the easiest thing to do on the essay. Because you're going to be given 7 documents, And I guarantee you these 7 documents are not going to include everything you know about whatever topic it is. In this case, the American Revolution and society. So once you finish analyzing your documents, you need to ask yourself, like, what else do I know that proves this point I'm trying to make that's not in these documents? Because I know a whole bunch of stuff that's not in here. Right? And then it's important that you then include evidence from outside the documents, right, to also support your argument, and then you get that point as well. So that's only 5 points. The DBQ is actually out of 7. But these are our last 2. We're not even going to worry about these until later. We're going to get really strong, really sturdy on these 5 points. Right? On thesis, contextualization, and evidence before we even attempt to do points 6 or 7. But, got a little secret for you. If you get a 5 out of 7 on your DBQ, you're in really good shape to get a 5 on your AP test, which is the highest score you can get. So, do these things really, really well, and we'll be in really good shape. All right? These are the last 2 points if you're curious. One is a document analysis point, which is one of the reasons why I asked you in class, what is the argument of this document? What is Hamilton implying? Why does Jefferson trust the common people? Those kinds of things. Once you start including that in your document analysis, then that you can bump up to a 6th point. And the 7th point is that we often call the unicorn point because it exists but doesn't exist. And that's the complexity point that demonstrates a complex understanding. So we'll talk about some ways in which to acquire these last 2 points, but we'll save that for later and just focus on these first 5 as our foundation of our good DBQ writing. Okay? So I want you to pause here. I want you to look at the rubric. I want you to really put in your own words what it takes to write a thesis, to contextualization, and the evidence points. So hit pause, do that on your handout, and then come back to this right now. So now you might be asking yourself, okay, that's the rubric, that's what it says to do, but what do I do? How do I make this happen? So we're going to give you a formula. We're going to give you a way to do this. Step 0, learn the formula, all right, and follow the formula. You might be asking yourself right now, well, what's the formula? I'm about to tell you. Step 1, always read the question. Read the question, mark up the question, analyze the question. What I often tell my students is make the question dumber. Meaning, College Board's going to ask you a fairly straightforward question in a very complex way. So simplify the question back down to something that you can chew on in a little more manageable fashion. All right. Next, ask yourself, what's the timeline? All right. What's the timeline given to me for this prompt? Is there a reason for this timeline? Is the first year really important and the last year really important, and therefore I should know kind of the beginning and end points here? Because when you're under pressure, when you're in a timed writing setting, you make silly mistakes. So it's important that you simplify things and really make yourself stop and think, what is this asking me? What do I have to do to be successful? What's my time frame? Does this question include categories like politics and economics? Does it not include categories? And the last thing you should do is identify the historical thinking skill. There's 3 options really. You're going to either get a comparison prompt, compare these 2 things, a cause or effect prompt, what were the causes, what were the effects, or a continuity/change prompt, meaning what did this change? What stayed the same because of this, right? So you'll only ever get one of these 3 things. You're not going to ever be asked to do multiple of them. So you'll either be asked to compare or contrast, to cause or effect, or to continuity or change, all right? So ask the prompt. So the prompt for today, obviously, is evaluate the extent to which the American Revolution changed society. So that's a change prompt, right? It's a continuity and change prompt. If I asked you, evaluate the various causes of the American Revolution, well, that's a causation prompt, right? So you want to ask yourself, what's it asking me to do? And then make sure that you've really chewed on the prompt so you know exactly what you're looking to do in your response. Step 2, get into your documents. Get right into your documents, all right? The documents are intentional. College Board put them there for a reason, and they're pieces of a puzzle. So your job is to put that puzzle together in a way that forms a good historical argument. Now, I also then say that the gaps in the documents are also intentional. Meaning, maybe the documents that I included for you here, for how the American Revolution changed society, maybe they just didn't include a woman's perspective on purpose so that you could include women and Republican motherhood in your prompt as your outside evidence. When I say the gaps are intentional, I mean they leave things out on purpose to leave things for you to use as your outside evidence, right? So pick up themes in the documents. Pick up the ways in which these documents are put together. Do 3 of these documents all support the same idea and 4 support a different idea? Cool, use them in that way, right? And be intentional about what you're doing with your documents. Step 3, organize your plan for your documents to support and further your argument. As I said earlier, and I told you I'd say again, it is not a document-only question. Your argument matters, right? You're not summarizing document 3 says, and then summarizing document 4 says. And no. How do these documents further the argument you're already trying to make, okay? Step 4, once we have really dove into the prompt, once we've read and analyzed our documents, once we've figured out how the documents fit together, write your thesis. All right, no thesis, no essay. ATFP. ATFP. Answer the full prompt or answer the prompt. You can pick whichever F word you prefer. ATFP, answer the full prompt, answer the freaking prompt, answer the fantastic prompt. Right? I try to write good prompts. Whichever F word you prefer. We'll leave it at that. And in your thesis, you need to make sure that if the prompt asks you for reasons or causes or changes, you're going multiple because the full prompt needs to be answered. All right? So in your thesis, ATFP, if I write on your essay in big red letters ATFP, it means you didn't answer the full prompt in your thesis. Second, make sure you use the historical thinking skill from the argument, for the prompt, excuse me. If the prompt asks you to compare, make sure you're giving a comparison in your thesis. Your thesis needs to create an argument. What are you going to be proving in your writing? And make sure you be specific, right? There was changes that were economic, like, right? And tell me some of the changes. That way your thesis includes actual history so that it's clear what you're arguing and that you know what you're arguing, okay? And your last step is get comfy with your rubric. All right, you need to get comfy with your rubric. It's a fine rubric. College Board does a fine job writing a vague enough rubric that we can apply it to any essay prompt that is given, which is good. But you got to get comfy with it, right? Got to have your thesis. That's 1 point. Got to have your contextualization. That's 1 point, which set up your argument. You have your 3 available evidence point that we talked about all. The outside evidence piece, the 3 document piece, and the 6 document that supports your argument piece. And then we're going to leave these last 2 points for later, knowing full well that we need to get really good at these 5 before these last 2 even have a chance of happening. Okay? Step 6, write and write and write. I'm going to guarantee you that we're going to do probably 5 or 6 DBQs this school year, at least, maybe more if we need to, because the only way to get better at this is by practicing. Oftentimes, we think about, like, if I read 35 books on fishing and I never go fishing, I'm not going to be a very good fisherman, right? If we watch a whole bunch of videos on how to write a DBQ and never write a DBQ, we're not going to be good at writing DBQs. So knowing, like, this video is necessary to introduce you to what we're talking about, but the only way to get good at this is by doing it, okay? And by saying, like, hey, it might suck, and that's okay. That's okay. So in your introduction, you need to include these 2 things. You need to contextualize your essay, and you need to make your argument. Contextualization means you're going to situate your essay in its proper historical place. Right? Give some background information. What should we know? What should any reader understand before we just jump in and start writing an argument? Okay? Think about it this way. If you were going to tell your friend about this fight that you and your boyfriend had, right? You would tell your friend first, all right, let me tell you what happened, right? And you go back a couple of days and say, first, like, these couple things happened, and then he did this, and then we had this huge fight over that, right? You need to include that important background information, otherwise the fight doesn't make sense. You just look like a crazy person. You might still look like a crazy person, because it's not ever worth fighting over a high school boyfriend or girlfriend, but that's a whole other point altogether. I'll leave that there. But provide the valuable, important background information so that we understand what's happening when you jump into your argument about how the American Revolution changed society, or how whatever, okay? Consider some questions that I think are helpful. 1, how did we get here? We didn't just wake up one day and be like, boom, American Revolution, let's change society. What's the background information? Salutary neglect, the Enlightenment, Great Awakening, Anglicization, regional specialization. There's a whole bunch of things you could do that are important background information that might be helpful to know. How did we get here? Second, what's been happening before this or during this or after this that makes this prompt important? Okay, so that's how you can do your contextualization. I'll provide you a lot of feedback on your contextualization because it's not hard, but it's also not easy to explain or to do well without understanding like what it looks like in practice, which is fine. Two, in your introduction, remember, because if it's not in the introduction or the conclusion, you don't get the point. You can put the best thesis in the world on paper, but if it's not in the right place, you don't get the point. College Board can be sticklers like that. Right? You're going to pay all that money to take a test. Well, school will pay much of the money, but you'll pay a little bit of money to take the test and have College Board tell you no because you didn't put your freaking thesis in the right place. Should have listened to the video. So your thesis needs to make a historically defensible claim, meaning you need your argument and your reasoning. Your argument and because, boom, boom, boom. Okay? It does not need to be one sentence. It doesn't need to be one perfectly crafted sentence. It could be like, the political changes were, boom. The social changes were, boom. The economic changes were, right? It doesn't need to be a perfectly formed, beautiful sentence because College Board recognizes, and when you're doing the AP reading, they tell you this every day, multiple times. Remember, this is a first draft of a student's work, and it is timed. So just a reminder that like nobody's looking for perfection. We're looking for historical argument. All right? But your thesis does need to be an introduction or the conclusion to earn the point. Okay? So you got your introduction done. You're feeling pretty good about it. Now you're like, okay, I got all these freaking documents. I don't know. I'm going to just summarize document 1 and then summarize document 2 and then summarize because that happens. You're not doing that though. The first thing you need to do is describe the content of the document. What is this document? What's happening in this document? And the second thing you need to do is use the document to support your argument. This demonstrates that there's political change because, right, right, this petition written by a free Afro-American woman demonstrates change because, so make sure that the document ties back to the argument that you're already trying to make. The third thing you can and will do with your documents that we're not doing yet is to source or analyze them, to tell me the context of the document, the audience of the document, the purpose and the point of view of the document to better support your argument. But we're not even there yet, so I'm not even going to get that far into this chunk of the rubric because that would be unfair to my point that we need to approach the DBQ in layers. So let's give it a try. Let's think it through. I'm gonna do like a mini modeling in which I kind of walk you through my thinking and the way I consider this. I picked 2 documents that you should already know. They're not in your DBQ, but they're 2 documents from period 3 you should be aware of that would fit in this DBQ if I chose to include these documents in DBQ. I did not. So that way you can get a little like exemplar work, a little like peek into my crazy brain work. And then you can do this. We'll do the same thing together live in our session this week. So the prompt is, as I've told you before, evaluate the extent to which the American Revolution changed society from 1765 to 1800. My thought process, and as I think this through, all right, we got 35 years, not a very long time, but pretty big years. Because in these 35 years, we're going to go from happily being British after the French and Indian War, proud members of the British Empire, feeling pretty good about our British identity, to independent, and to a second form of government with a very changed society. So much has changed, but also I think to myself, there's a lot of things that haven't changed, right? Like 1765 to 1800, like, well, slavery still exists in the South. Women are still looked at as second-class citizens, if citizens at all. A lot of people still don't trust the government because, like, the Whiskey Rebellion, like, you know, there's a lot of things stay the same, but a lot of things that change too because, I mean, we're a whole new country and we're on national government round 2. So the important thing is that in this window of time, you got to identify those changes because the prompt's asking us what changed in society. So then I think to myself, what did change? Well, there's a Revolutionary War, so the nation's identity changed. The economy changed because we went from being under England's mercantile system to being under the Constitution with Hamilton's financial plan. One thing that remained the same was Americans' desire to rebel against authority. I think about, like, you know, the Stamp Act riots, that's 1765. Then I think about, you know, like the Boston Tea Party. That's like this challenging of authority. Then I think about like Shays Rebellion and Whiskey Rebellion that happened after independence. So that's maybe a continuity that would be helpful in there. So that's the way I think about this prompt is I know a whole bunch of stuff that fits in this time period. Let's see what the documents then give me so that I can make an argument out of this. So document 1. It's not actually a document in your essay, but it's just fun for our exercise today. And I included all of this in your handout as well, so you can follow along. Document 1, the source. What does the source say? It is an ordinance. It's a law for the government of the territory of the United States northwest of the Ohio River. Oh, cool. I know this document. This is the Northwest Ordinances, which I remember is really the only notable accomplishment under the Articles of Confederation government when they established orderly government in the Northwest Territory, like how to spread out and make sure that those states still became equal states. But they also abolished slavery in the Northwest Territory. No slavery north of the Ohio River, because we talked about that in class. Winchell told me. So then let me look at what the document says. Article 6. There shall be neither slavery nor involuntary servitude in the said territory. Oh. All right. Well, that's cool. But any person who escapes into that territory from whom labor or service is lawfully claimed in any of the original states, such fugitive may be lawfully reclaimed and sent back to the person claiming his or her labor or service. So, slavery is abolished there, but slavery must still be legal somewhere, because if slaves escape there, they're going to be sent back to the person who claims their service by law. Interesting. I can do something with this. So first, I'm going to describe the document. I'm going to tell you what the document is. The Revolutionary War also caused some in society to question slavery's place in a nation founded on republican principles. Ooh, there's my argument. All right, then what am I going to do with the document to support that argument? That slavery has become questioned by some, not all, some in society. The Northwest Ordinance was passed by the Articles of Confederation of Congress in 1787, effectively banning slavery north of the river. There describes the document. I described what's in the document. I didn't quote the document. I didn't necessarily summarize the document. I just described what the document was and what was happening in that document. But I have not yet used the document to support my argument that some have questioned society. As this was the first time, here's my supportive piece, that the national government acted to restrict the expansion of slavery, this document demonstrates a shift in society. Ooh, here I am using the language of the prompt that asks, how much does the American Revolution change society? It demonstrates a shift in society, at least in the northern states, away from slavery. So here, I'm acknowledging a couple of things, right? I'm implying that slavery is kept in the southern states. So if I wanted to, I could write an argument about one continuity. Ooh, now we're looking at complexity and real complex. Wait, I told you we weren't going to do that part of the essay. Scratch that. Rewind, ignore, forget that. Regardless, what I've done here is I've used the content of this document, that slavery has been abolished. That's the content of the document. It says it right there. To support my argument that it's the Revolutionary War which caused society to question slavery and thus abolish it some places, specifically in the northern states. There we go. Description supports my argument. Ooh, document 2. I don't know what this one's going to be. James Madison. Oh, we know James Madison. He wrote the Constitution. He wrote many of the important Federalist Papers. We read a bunch of James Madison stuff. We're good to go there. James Madison says, ambition must be made to counteract ambition. It's deep. James Madison, philosopher. It may be a reflection on human nature that such devices should be necessary. Ooh, here we go. We need a device to control the abuses of government. But what is government itself but the greatest of all reflections on human nature? If men were angels, there it is. No government would be necessary. So in creating a government which is going to use men to govern men, note here, we could include the fact that women are excluded. Now we're using outside evidence. In framing a government which is to be administered by men over men, the great difficulty lies in this. First, enable the government to control the governed, right? Order. The government has to be able to establish order and control the people. And then you need to create systems that oblige or obligate the government to control itself. Talk about checks and balances. Good document. And I think it does reflect a great amount of change that comes from the American Revolution. Let's see what I did with it. First, I'm going to describe it. The Revolutionary War created the need for change in political systems because we're independent, so we have to change our political systems. James Madison and others wrote the Federalist Papers. urging society to support the newly proposed constitution because they saw a need for a stronger system of government. I described the document. James Madison is writing about needing a new, stronger form of government because it's necessary. This need for change, and now I'm going to use it to form an argument about what's changed. This need for change was caused by the Revolutionary War fear of tyranny. The first fear in the 1760s and 1770s of tyranny, which led to a very weak form of government under the Articles. This experience led to political change, as the new Americans were more eager to expand the power of the federal government to create more order and stability. So the change I'm saying here is the revolution caused a fear of tyranny, which made a very weak government, but then that led to the need for a stronger form of government, thus the Constitution. So in both of these cases, I've given you American Revolution changed the way society views slavery, American Revolution changed the way society saw government, now we're in business. Last thing you have to make sure you always do is pick evidence from outside the documents. You can't just drop in a couple things, a couple words and phrases here and there, but you need to include SFI, specific factual information that supports your argument. What is your outside evidence? How does it support what you're trying to say? My thought process, if I had this 2-document DBQ, which would be nice, is, I talked about slavery and governance, but there's a whole bunch of other changes that I haven't even talked about yet, and a whole bunch of other evidence that supports the changes I already identified. All right, there's more I could say about slavery that wasn't in the documents. Where I don't want to make a new argument. I can take the argument I already have and make sure I have other evidence to support it. So there's other changes that I could write about. Women, social classes, a whole bunch of stuff. Economics. But there's also evidence that supports the changes I've already identified. So either way works just fine. What I did was I added extra evidence in this example. Extra evidence to a category I've already identified, which is slavery. Okay? So I took an argument, I used a document for it, and I'm going to use outside evidence to support that exact same part of the argument, which is, I think, the best way to do this. Additionally, some northern states, like Massachusetts and Rhode Island, abolished slavery immediately because of the war, while other northern states, like Pennsylvania and New York, created gradual emancipation laws. Again, demonstrating the change the revolution brought in regards to the institution of slavery, as states that had previously had relatively few slaves acted to abolish the institution. There you go. And then I used more outside evidence because we haven't talked about the ladies yet, and that would piss off Abigail Adams because she told us to remember the ladies. And just because John forgot doesn't mean we should forget. Women, too, saw a change in their roles in society because of the revolutionary era. So I'm tying the change back to the changes that happened in the revolution. Women embraced a role in the political sphere before the war, joining protests, organizing the Daughters of Liberty, creating homespun cloth to promote non-importation, the boycotts. Additionally, after the war, the social role for women changed to a role of Republican motherhood, as women were tasked with raising the next generation of political leaders with virtues to take on governance in the new nation. And just like that, we've written a DBQ. We used both documents that we were given, and we used outside evidence twice. So I hope this is helpful. I have a handout for you to complete, to think through. I think that it'll be much more illuminating to look at the actual DBQ we're going to write this week in class. Instead of 7 documents like you'll actually have in May, we're going to only start with 5. So we can make sure that we're using 4 or 5 in our argument to make sure that it doesn't feel too overwhelming. But we'll ramp that up as we go, just like I'm going to add those extra layers of document analysis and complexity. Hope this was helpful. At the very least, to give you some background information for what we're going to be working on in class live this week. Have a great rest of your day, and I will see you soon, and I really can't wait. Thanks, y'all.